Director's regularly scheduled meeting. We are pleased to welcome everyone tonight. We started this afternoon with our study session, which is around bond and levy planning with Mr. Treble Carlson from Piper Sandler. A very comprehensive study session going over bond and levy history and future projections. If you're interested, you could check that out on our YouTube channel. If you weren't able to attend earlier. We will proceed with our agenda with the flag salute. This evening we have the Three Rivers Elementary leadership team here led by the principal, Mrs. Bacon.
Good evening, Board President Brown, Superintendent Whitney, and school board members. I am Jamie Bacon, the principal of Three Rivers Elementary, and I'm here tonight along with a few of our students that exemplify Chinook pride. These students are part of our 5th grade ASB as well as our Chinook character crew. These individuals help ignite school spirit, they model our 3 for 3 expectations around the hallway, and they demonstrate those leadership skills we want to see in our graduates. With the support of our ASB, Mrs. Purvis, our ASB and Chinook character crew have become valuable mini paras around our playground and in our cafeteria, growing a beautiful partnership between our staff and our students. They have also continued that passion of creating that awareness around World Down Syndrome Day, which is next Friday, March 21st.
Good evening. I am Yasleen Madrigal, and I am a Chinook character crew member. We are excited to share with you that our ASB and Chinook character crew helped our school collect over 650 pairs of white socks for each of our students to decorate in celebration of World Down Syndrome Day. We encourage you to make a pair too.
As we prepare to participate in wearing mixed match socks on World Down Syndrome Day, we celebrate our students in continuing this new tradition at Three Rivers, and I'm honored that a few of them are here with us tonight. At this time, I would like our Chinooks to come to the podium so we can introduce them as well as their families.
And if families could please raise your hand when your child introduces himself.
I am Yasleen Madrigal, and these are my parents.
I'm Kinley Hart, and this is my mom.
I'm Adeline Warburton. I'm Adeline Warburton, and that's my dad.
I'm Alicia Vergara, and this is my mom.
I am Zaya Espinoza, and those are my parents.
I am Zena Espinoza, and those are my parents. I'm Briella Lianos, and that's my dad.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our our student board representatives have something for each of you, and thank you so much to parents who took the time in a busy week to be here tonight with your students so that they could lead us in our flag salute. It is something that as Pasco School District, we are proud to have students leading us in our flag salute every board meeting. Thank you also to the Three Rivers Elementary staff members who came tonight to represent their school. We appreciate you being here. Ms. Richardson, may we have a roll call, please? Present.
Present. Present.
Present.
Present. Present. Present.
Present. Thank you, Ms. Richardson. The next item on our agenda is the approval of our regular board meeting minutes from February 25th, 2025. I would entertain a motion.
Madam President, I move to approve the regular board meeting minutes of February 25th, 2025.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second to approve the regular board meeting minutes from February 25th, 2025. Is there any discussion? We will vote on the approval by voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next item, agenda review. Superintendent Whitney.
Board President Brown, there are no additions or changes to tonight's agenda. However, I would like to call your attention to the request for an executive session under 4231-101B for land lease and/or purchase and I litigation.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Tensmeyer, who we have two special recognitions this evening. And so those are always a really enjoy hearing about who we recognize from the school district, whether it is planned because it's a special recognition month or because we are recognizing the work of our hard-working employees. Ms. Tensmeyer.
Good evening, Board President Brown, Superintendent Whitney, and members of the board. The week of March 17th through 23rd is Washington State School Retirees Appreciation Week, a time to recognize and celebrate the invaluable contributions of retired teachers and educators. Tonight, we want to express our gratitude to the local retired educators who are part of the Benton Franklin School Retirees Association, a branch of the Washington State School Retirees Association. These individuals are not only former educators, but also dedicated advocates for local teachers, students, and the entire community. Their commitment extends far beyond their years in the classroom. They actively support charitable projects, sponsor scholarships, engage in community events, and volunteer their time to enrich the lives of students and educators. Their passion for education continues to make a lasting impact. We are honored to have several members of the Benton Franklin School Retirees Association with us this evening, including President Dottie Stevens, who is going to share a few words. Victoria Russell, do you want to come up here with her?
Thank you. So much as she said, we are representatives of that group. We locally have 841 members. We support luncheons, and one of our chief things we do that we love doing is recognizing superintendents in January, which Michelle Whitney is always there and a major support of for us. We support public education, including school boards. And we are working toward health, welfare, and benefits for our employees, present and future. We do scholarships, and we are focusing more on local teachers of the future at WSU Tri-Cities, Heritage, and CBC, which now has the K-3 program. We do mini grants, $300 also to teachers. And so we thank you for this opportunity. And because Michelle Whitney is also a member, we will give her her directorate at this time. And I'm joined here by President-elect Victoria, teacher out of Hanford, and I came out of Kennewick. And right. Congratulations.
Well, I was once president for 4 years in a row, and here I am again getting ready to take on the role again at the end of June. Dottie is being very quiet, but she is now going to be the president of the state WSHRA president for the next year. And with that, we are also very involved in Pasco-Kennewick Rotary, so we work diligently with that, and so we're so glad to have Anna join us for that as well. And we'll be meeting tomorrow, Anna, and I'll be your greeter, so make sure you're there. But we thank you for this opportunity. I can't think of nothing better to do after teaching for 44 years, 20 in Chicago and then 25 here at Hanford High School and middle school. Started out with middle school and then high school. But I am just enamored with all three school districts. They do such a lovely job. And one of my favorite things to do is I go in 2 days a week and I'm on team read And as a high school teacher, I'm working with third graders. I'm glad I don't teach the whole class, but I love working one-on-one. They have so much energy, but they're just lovely. And all elementary schools, when you walk in, they're just so warm and inviting, so I enjoy it. Thank you very much for having us. Clear bag, okay.
All your concerts and games that you're going to go to.
I was saying to her,
We'll have you go right
when I worked at Saks Fifth Avenue, as we worked at Saks Fifth Avenue, we had to have a clear bag. You couldn't carry your regular bag, and they wanted to see what you were going in and out with. Closer.
Thanks, ladies.
Yes, we do. Thank you very much. Have a good meeting.
Thank you for coming. I'll see you tomorrow.
Yes, you will. On to the next thing.
That's right. Okay, so tonight we are also honored to recognize National School Social Work Week, which takes place from March 2nd through 8th. This is an opportunity to celebrate the contributions of our school social workers, dedicated professionals who provide critical support to students, ensuring they have the tools they need to succeed both in and out of the classroom. We are fortunate to have a team of social workers and mental health professionals who work tirelessly to remove barriers to learning, foster strong school-family community partnerships, and create safe, inclusive learning environments for all students. Their work is essential in supporting student social emotional well-being and advancing the district's commitment to student success. So tonight, we would like to recognize the following individuals. Please come forward as I call your names. Megan French, mental health therapist at McLaughlin Middle School. If you want to stand right up there. Trina Perez Nunez, mental health therapist at Ochoa Middle School. Jessie Arambol, social worker, New Horizons High School. And Anna Perez, mental health coordinator. These professionals serve as advocates, mentors, and change makers, ensuring that students have the emotional, behavioral, and social support they need to thrive academically and personally. Their efforts in implementing social emotional interventions, crisis response services, and mental health support are instrumental in helping students develop the resilience and skills necessary for lifelong success. So let's give them a round of applause. Also get clear back. We'll have you guys forward. Sure. Thank you. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you for coming.
Before we move on, I really want to magnify the work that both of these groups of school retirees and school social workers do for our students and for our staff. I see Dottie and Victoria all the time. I attend board meetings all around the area, and I am always seeing them at board meetings, and they're such familiar faces to me now, and they're just always so cheerful and have so much to offer our staff and our students, and we couldn't do the work we do as school board members or as staff members without the support of school social workers who step in and really help to close that gap for students who need that extra mental health support or need those just sometimes we don't think about that students might be more successful if they just had some more resources at home that those social workers can really help to close those gaps. So we appreciate the work that they do to support the district, and a very deserved recognition this evening. Any other comments from the board before we move on? Both all of our recognees have left, but is that a word, recognees?
I know, I kind of got teary-eyed just because, anyway, because I've had a couple of kids that were in special ed, and one of those ladies, had a huge impact on my children's lives. So anyway, it makes me even more grateful. I know all of these teachers do, but when it personally touches your own life, it has a bigger impact, and you realize the importance of what they do and the social workers throughout our district do. So thank you so much I wish they were here so I could tell them that.
On to the next item on the agenda, audience comments. The Pasco School Board of Directors values feedback and comments from our staff, students, community, and parents. You are welcome to address the board publicly. If you choose to do so, you have up to 2 minutes. This light that is in front of Ms. Richardson will blink yellow at 1 minute and 30 seconds, notifying you that you have 30 seconds to wrap up your thoughts, and then blink red and beep at 2 minutes, so that you know that your time is up. And also, if you are online, we welcome those comments as well. You will just be muted at 2 minutes. Is there anyone present in the boardroom who would like to address the board? Mr. Garrett, do we have anyone online? Thank you. Moving on to our next item on the agenda is our consent agenda. This evening on the consent agenda, we have personnel, warrants, asset preservation program building condition assessment scores, approval of revision to board policy 1115, student representatives to the board of directors, approval of revision to board policy 1630, evaluation of the superintendent, overnight student travel for Delta, Chiawana, and Pasco School and Chiawana High School speech and debate students to University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington, overnight student travel for Chiawana High School to Wind Ensemble and Chamber Orchestra programs to Vancouver, Washington, overnight student travel for Pasco High School music program to State Soul and Ensemble Festival in Ellensburg, Washington, out-of-state student travel for Pasco High School DECA students to Pro Sports Day in Portland, Oregon, approval of 2025-2026 school calendar, resolution number 1053, capital projects fund to the general fund, approval of state transitional bilingual program annual plan EGMS application form package 219, and approval of conditional certificates. I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. Ms. Richardson, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Aye.
Dr. Norberg?
Yes.
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 Thank you, Ms. Richardson. Next item on the agenda is action items, of which we have none this evening, and that takes us to our extended study discussion. Mr. Hebden will be addressing us on our 2024-2025 budget update and levy planning.
Good evening, Board President Phillip. I mean, that's habit, isn't it? Good evening, Board President Brown. It's even written in my notes to say that. I'm sorry. Good evening, Board President Brown, members of the board, and Superintendent Whitney. Before you tonight with a budget update and a levy planning presentation. Purpose of the presentation tonight is just that, budget update. Inform the board of the district's budget management strategies for the second half of the year, and ask for board direction specific to levy planning. And timing of this presentation is good because we are exactly halfway through our fiscal year. There's some key factors that come into play as we've turned the corner at the beginning of January is the first month of our apportionment where OSPI sends us our actual revenues based on actual enrollment instead of budgeted enrollment. Through December, September, October, November, December, they send us revenues based off of what we've budgeted. And then starting in January, they go back and they say, okay, what did your actual enrollment come in at? And they start paying us based off of our actual enrollment. Also, what happens in February, on February's enrollment, we understand the picture of our federal grants and our state grants, and they let us know what those amounts are, any carryovers and things like that. We also have a better picture of what our payroll encumbrances or what our payroll expenses are going to be, because they now reflect service credits for our staff and our salary placement. So it's just a good timing to really look at our budget, what we spent for 6 months, and then what we anticipate looking through the rest of the year. Also want to provide some context about what we're calling financial tension. So we want to talk about what some of those districts across the nation, in our state, locally, are experiencing some financial tension, and provide some context. We're not alone as we look at some of these things. Some of the factors that districts are experiencing in the landscape that we are in are around the prototypical school funding model. As you're aware of, the number of staffing units that the state allocates to us and the salary that we get for those staffing units aren't adequate to run the districts. That's why we have levy and have local dollars that kick in to fill that gap. And some examples of those, teacher librarians. You know, the state allocates us about 22 teacher librarians, and we have over 25 sites that have libraries. Psychologists, the state allocates us 2.93 FTE for psychologists for a district of over 18,000 students, and that's challenging. Another piece that demonstrates the salary discrepancy is for every teacher that the state allocates to us, it's $78,209 for their salary. Our average salary is upwards of $90,000+. Certificated administrators, like our principals, the state allocates $116,000, and that's about $130,000, $140,000 to be competitive, plus for principals. And so those are just some examples of that discrepancy that you see on what the state prototypical school funding model, the number of staffing units you get, as well as the salary that they allocate to pay for those staffing units. And that just puts strain on local resources to fill the gap between what the state allocates to us. Rising costs. This, inflation has increased for salaries, benefits, classroom materials. It seems like, the term widget. Widgets cost more everywhere, not just eggs, beef. It's across the board. A lot of things are costing more and more. Utilities, insurance, and I'll dive into insurance in a little bit. Transportation, other costs. The short of it is costs are outpacing revenues. This is a neat little chart that OSPI put out, and it really demonstrates, and you may have seen this before in other presentations. If you look at 2018-19, that's there in the middle. This shows the per pupil investment in public education. In 18-19, right there in the middle of the chart, they were investing $12,525 per pupil. And then if you fast forward to 23-24, that's down almost $1,000 to $11,588, and just a demonstration that we have less funding invested in public education throughout the state at the legislative level. Locally, tried to put together what does our revenues look like up against inflation, a change in our revenues year over year, and that's that orange dotted line. I know this looks kind of crazy, but if you look at the trend line of the orange dotted line, it's trending downward to the right, whereas inflation is trending upward and to the right, and just a demonstration of our revenues are not keeping up with inflation. I mentioned insurance earlier. On average, our year-over-year costs are 18% higher over the last 5 years. So every year, over the last 5 years, it's 18% higher. Insurers view Washington schools as a higher risk due to a lack of a statute of limitations in certain covered categories. So premiums are higher. And just as an example, in 2020-2021 school year, our premiums were $2.3 million. And in 24-25, they were, or in this current year, we paid $4.5 million for our premiums. We just got word the other day from the risk pool to expect, as a base, 15% of an increase. That would put our premiums roughly estimating at $5.1 million for next year. Just an example of cost escalations that we're experiencing. And the state, when the legislature, historically, when they've put out their budget, they put out the IPD for MSOC to help cover this. It's 2.5%, 3% MSOC, and we're seeing these increases. Some other contributions to the funding gaps and limitations are the state legislature, and this was talked about in the study session with Trevor a little bit. The cap on the levy at $1.50. That's a limitation to the ability to raise funds locally. Special education is an interesting one. The state's funding for special education is not quite adequate. I know there's some legislation happening or discussions about legislation happening right now on the Hill, and we'll see what happens there. But historically, the district has kicked in local funds or BEA funds to help offset a shortfall in special education to meet the needs of our special education students. And so that's a strain, or that's a shortfall in the state's allocation. So enrollment shifts, districts are losing students, and I'll show you what that looks like for the Pasco School District specifically. And other districts are seeing increases in students and then struggling to find classroom space and staffing for that. Let's talk a little bit about levy dollars up against inflation. You could see there, prior to the legislative action to cap levies, that orange dip between 2018 2019, that's the cap at $1.50. It looked like the blue and the orange line were kind of in line, almost like inflation and the levy were in alignment. And then the cap happened, and there's a big gap between what our year-over-year levy increases or amounts are, and then what inflation is doing. And inflation, yet again, is outpacing this revenue source as it's currently and historically been. With levy, when you qualify for levy, and then you also are eligible, or if you have a levy, voter-approved levy, you are also eligible for LEA, Local Effort Assistant. We've talked about that before. And these charts here are, the one on the left talks about all districts in Washington State, and over time, since 2016, how much LEA funding has gone to districts. And downward to the right is not a good trend. That's less funding to districts for local effort assistance. And then on the right is the specific to Pasco. What does our landscape look like? Not as drastic as the state, but still it is a downward to the right, and we are seeing less funds in LEA over time. And typically when you see more levy, you qualify for less LEA funding. As your property values increase, typically you see less LEA, you qualify for less LEA. I talked a little bit about special education and wanted to show you what does that specifically look like for Pasco School District. In the current year, our revenues for special education is $39.3 million, and in order to meet the needs of our students and run the program, it's about $40.4 million, so that's a gap of about $1 million. We are working to qualify for what is called Special Education Safety Net funding, and that is demonstrating needs to the state that are higher than what they're funding us for, essentially. And so we are, it's kind of it's a unique cycle. You don't know if you qualify for it until the end of the year. But we anticipate anywhere from $500 to $1.5 million in qualifying additional revenue for that can help us bridge that gap of $1 million. But again, you don't know until almost the fiscal year's over. So that's kind of what is that going to look like? It could be that we don't qualify for any of it. But so that's one we'll keep a close eye on and monitor. But that is the gap potentially in our special education funding.
Mr. Hebden?
Yes.
Do we apply for that funding, or how does that process work?
That is a very, very in-depth process of applying. It starts early February, maybe even in January. Myself and my staff work closely with Tracy Wilson, who's the executive director of special education. I think we have some of them back here in the back. Also, yeah, very, very, very tedious process, and yeah.
And that's through OSPI. So we submit an application, and we work with
Correct.
OSPI to see if we qualify for that money, and then they'll tell us in August.
Yep.
Okay. And that's a yearly amount. They
Yes.
right.
Annual process.
Did we qualify for that amount last year?
We did not qualify last year, but we've done some significant changes to the way to help us qualify.
Okay. What are some just general metrics that we have to meet?
It is a super complicated system to navigate to get special ed safety net, and we're happy to bring that back at a future meeting or provide the information to the board alternatively, but it's complicated. And I would want Executive Director Wilson, who oversees special education, and Assistant Superintendent Carla Lobos to be part of that conversation.
Perfect. All right, I mentioned enrollment. Here's our enrollment. Just seeing, I should have updated this with February, I apologize. The dashed maroon-ish line there, that's current year. You can see we're down from our high water mark of green, which was 1920. And then, that's kind of hard to say, well, what does those numbers even look like? So here's the data behind it. Head count is usually used for, building capacity and how we plan for housing students. As far as budget goes, we use FTE, and that's what the state uses to fund us, which is full-time equivalent. And so that's the number that's associated with finance pieces. So we'll look at FTE line item there. 1920 was the high water mark of 17.9. See, we dropped down there to down 304 in that next year because of the COVID pandemic, and we've upped and down a little bit there. The net difference to current day is we're down 278 students from that high water mark, and that would be the equivalent of about $3 million in revenue, but kind of a flat line after that initial drop from COVID. So student enrollment drives the majority. That's our number one driver of PSD revenue. So we've talked about birth rates before, and even though you look around our community, you'd see, wow, look at all this growth, all these houses, all this stuff that's happening. Why aren't we seeing more students? This was some information that Franklin County we worked with them to get. And blue line is population. Yeah, population is growing. The red line is the birth rates. It's just people aren't having as many kids, so we're not necessarily seeing as many kids in our schools. So that's an unusual place to be in for the Pasco School District that's used to seeing in years prior to COVID 2, 3, 4, even 500 kids in a given year over the prior year. So. In addition to all of this, the demands for schools in the services that are provided, they're expected to provide mental health support, technology access, career readiness programs, and all of these things are without a change in funding from the legislation. And so these are added demands on the system. Uncertain political and economic conditions potentially affect federal, state, and economical or educational funding. That's been kind of the hot topic in the news, and if the economy slows, tax revenues could decrease, limiting school funding even further. We've been fortunate in our economy, in our area, that our tax collections, the voter-approved tax amounts, we've been able to collect at a high rate. If the economy slows, that could change and could impact those funding sources, or that funding source. In your study session, Trevor Carlson talked about this. This is a slide directly from his presentation, and it shows the assessed value. And he shared that 2025 assessed value came out in the Franklin County tax booklets. That's something that we monitor very, very closely. And so our tax collection rate for 2025 is going to be $1.90. We still collect the same exact amount because voters approve the amount, not the rate. And so we collect the same amount. And so wanted to bring you up to speed on the latest on those developments with the new assessed valuation. Increased costs and the potential of some decreased revenue equals the need for reduction in spending or adjustments in spending. So as I mentioned, 6 months into the year is a good time to review everything. So we did a deep dive into our revenues to make sure, hey, what are we seeing in our revenues, and what do we need to be concerned of or not, or let's make sure these line up. The first item there is a transportation safety net and some to and from school allocation. That was a net gain of about $833,000. We did some work in January to apply for transportation safety net. That was $466,000 that we got some last year. It wasn't to that amount. We weren't certain that it was going to be there, and the legislation had set aside so much, and with all the districts concerned about money, we thought, well, there's probably going to be a lot more districts that are going after this funding source, so we weren't certain we would get it. So we didn't budget anything for it, but we were going to apply for it. We got $466,000 for it. We're like, great, that's a positive. That's to our gain. And then so that's a net gain for transportation. What that does is that reduces. We budget for transportation some BEA supplement, meaning we know that we get X amount of dollars for transportation. We know that it takes a little bit more to operate transportation, and so we supplement that with basic education dollars. And so now we know that $833,000 more comes from the state, so we can reduce the BEA supplement for that. So that's a positive impact to our budget. So special education and other special program grant dollars came in a little bit more than what we budgeted for. There were some other miscellaneous items that came in, are looking like they'll come in a little bit less than anticipated. Our local effort assistance, LEA, is coming in less than anticipated in our budget. And then some apportionment and TTK, which is transition to kindergarten, came in a little bit higher than anticipated to the tune of $1 million. So from $331 million, we're looking at about a $1.8 million more in revenues. This could lead to a budget extension for us. We might need to increase the board granted expenditure authority in order to spend those additional revenues, and we will talk about that at a future board meeting, but just wanted to bring that to your attention there. In addition to looking at our revenues, we want to look at our expenditures. We have $172.7 million that we'd spent in the first half, trying to forecast out best estimate on what we would spend the rest of the year. Looked at prior 3 years, made some assumptions there, making a best estimate. If we were to spend as we've done in the past, it looks like we would spend about $337.7 million. That would exceed the board granted authority, which is not good. So we would exceed that by $4.8 million, which is not what we would want to do. So we need to do something. We need to adjust and figure this out.
Mr. Hebden?
Yes.
Clarifying question. So that 4.8 million in the red on slide 22, that takes into account the surplus funds on slide 21? So that you said we got more revenue than anticipated.
Yeah. If
And
you look at the forecasted revenues, that's taking into consideration the additional revenues.
The 4.8 million is taking consideration of those.
So I've taken the new forecasted expenditure and the new forecasted revenue, and that's a gap of 4.8.
So how much do we have in reserves then?
I'll get to that in just a moment. It's a great question. It's the next slide, actually. Good question. It's like we read your mind. So our reserves, and these are budgeted at the beginning of the year. Should we spend? Let's see, what did I say? I wrote this down. Should we spend what the board authorizes to, and if we bring in all of our revenues that we budgeted and we spend what we spend, this is what we would have in reserves at the end of this school year. So assignments, $4.6 million. We have restricted fund balance, which is for our grants and some program dollars, inventory and carryover that are restricted. And then the 5% reserves, which is 5% of our current year budgeted revenues, as the board has asked us to maintain, of $16.5 million for our total fund balance of $22.3 million there. So that is answer your question, Board Member Norberg.
And the assignments are what again?
The assignments are some set-asides that we have. Some of them would be for, we've called them, if we needed new classroom to house students, we could move things around.
So there are 4 expenditures that are more expensive than we can pay in one budget year. So for example, there's a line item for athletics and visual and performing arts. That assignment has typically been used for the times we need to replace field turf, for example. So those assignments are for items that are larger values, dollar values, than what we can pay for in a single fiscal year. Moving of portable classrooms is another way that we've used those assignments in the past.
And curriculum, doesn't curriculum come out of those assignments? Or is
It
that-
can.
Okay.
So this 5% reserves, which we've requested to have in the past, how does that compare with what the state says that we should have?
I think you're reading
It's
ahead of
almost like you read the report and know exactly what the next slide is going to be.
It's a great
You're
segue.
doing it logically.
No, and then
We're
that
all
means
logical.
that means we're presenting it logically.
Yeah.
It's a great question. While this has been our practice, it's been and it has been for many years. Times are changing, and we, along with every other district in the state, are under more scrutiny than in previous times. 6 districts are in binding conditions. I looked it up today. And that means they are not solvent, and the state gets involved in their operations. It makes sense that the SAO, which is the State Auditor's Office, is worried about school districts and their financial conditions. So in the last several years, the SAO has been interested in the financial condition of school districts throughout the state. And we are no exception. I've been, they ask the last couple of years, they're like, hey, we noticed this or that, and what plans do you have, and things like that. They look at financial ratios such as change in fund balance or the fund balance sufficiency, meaning how many days do you have in operations. And their recommendation, to answer your question specifically, their recommendation is a 60 days operating reserve. For the Pasco School District, that would be roughly, I think it's like $54 million in reserves.
Or about 10%, right?
Yeah,
More than 5%.
maybe a little bit more.
Yeah.
Close to probably 11 or 12. So,
That 22,300,000 is about 11% ish on the previous slide, on slide 23. The 22 million.
oh, yeah, sorry. 16 is the 5%. Yeah.
16 is 5%. Then,
Yeah.
So then 22 is maybe
Yeah.
7 or
Sorry.
8.
Yep. You're right. I was thinking 22 was 5%, but yeah, no, you're right. So yeah, 60 days operating is what their recommendation. It's not a requirement, and that's just in their opinion what would be. I guess maybe they would stop asking about financial condition. So.
What was the 60-day amount then, again?
If we're at about 30 days right now, and just doing quick math, I would estimate probably about 35 million. I should run those numbers and I can get it back to you, but yeah.
In reserve.
So
Well, 60.
that brings up a good question. Are they talking about just fund balance, like the 22 million? Was that 28 days, or is it the actual 5% reserve? So let me get back to you on that. It's a good question. We need to clarify that. But nonetheless, that's kind of the things that they're looking at in regards to our reserves. And the reserves, fund balance and reserves and assignments, they're financial tools that you as a board have available to you in making decisions around the operations of the district. And if you decide to take steps towards that, a 60-day operating reserve is that a better tool for you later? Yeah. And then if you use it, you have to replenish it. It's not like it just automatically reappears. So you have to be thoughtful and intentional with that. So, yeah, good question. So, what does this look like moving forward for the district? That we've got some short-term, some medium-term, and long-term talking points and things that we've been working on doing. Short-term, operationalizing a budget freeze. What is a budget freeze? Budget freeze is a temporary restriction on spending that allows school district to control expenses to maintain financial stability. This means expenditures will be paused, limited, and/or require additional approval until the district's financial situation improves. A budget freeze is a proactive measure to prevent deeper financial challenges and ensure long-term financial health. While it may create short-term constraints, it will ultimately help maintain the district's financial stability. Again, short term, this last week, we've had communication and collaboration with our leadership council and our budget administrators in developing spending plans for the next 6 months. I guess that was last week. This week, communications and collaboration with principals and department administrators, communication with our labor partners, with you as a school board, and cabinet administrators reviewing these spending plans that have been developed, and continually monitoring the district's financial condition and inform the need to continue the budget freeze.
Mr. Hebden?
Yeah.
So when we talk about a budget freeze and say a temporary restriction on spending, what kind of things are we restricting spending on?
Whatever we can without impacting things close to kids. Michelle, you wanted to say something?
I do. That's their cue when I move the microphone up that she's going to speak. So we are working on executing the budget freeze. And so what we've asked all budget managers to do is go into their budget and look at what do they need to operate their departments between now and the end of the fiscal year, which is August 15th, or we said August 15th.
Right.
So we just this morning saw for the first time the kind of rough drafts of those proposals. There's some clarifications that departmental leaders need to go back and ask their staffs to do between now and next Tuesday. So by next Tuesday, we should have a better idea of what will be on that quote-unquote list. So tonight's presentation is really just to let you know we've started that process, but we don't even know at this point where it's still too early in the game to be able to answer that question. Certainly once we know, we would inform the board. So this is not the last budget presentation you'll have. You can expect to hear from us more frequently between now and at least August about where we are in this process.
Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you, Kevin.
So 3 to 9 months, obviously, presentations about the budget to the board, closely monitoring legislative action. You know, that's, this week in Olympia, the TWIO with Dan Steele, always looking at that. I don't know if any of you follow that, but that's great information. Just put on a couple of pieces here. Senate Bill 5263 and House Bill 1310 on either side of the coin. Those are sped bills gaining more traction than the MSOC bills that are listed there, and we continue to watch those. They're not dead, and we'll see what happens, but that's what we do, continue to watch those, advocate for that. We're in staffing for next year and adjusting that as we operationalize 2 new high schools and looking at curriculum materials, where can we save there, what is absolutely necessary and essential, and looking at maintenance projects. Like I said, our insurance increase is anticipated there, and then of course engaging in levy planning. That is expiring at the end in December of 2026. So we'll be working with that as well. Longer term, again, continue to advocate for legislative change and action, continue to monitor staffing and budgets, adjust staffing ratios to match enrollment numbers, adjusting our materials, supplies, and operating costs. That's MSOCs. You know, I said that on the previous slide. I didn't define that. I apologize. MSOCs is material, supplies, and operating costs. Long-range financial planning and modeling to include fund balance targets to begin steps towards the Washington State Auditor's Office 60-day operating reserve recommendation, if that's the board's desire. And that's steps. That doesn't mean we need to get there immediately. That takes time. But progress towards that. So, all of this to be said, that we as staff need direction from the board, and so a little bit of shift here. We need direction from you as a board to prepare for a levy election, and it's just kind of a head nod to say yes, prepare for a levy for the expiring levy in December. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I guess I should do that first, as long as they're not really hard and complicated.
Before we move to board discussion on the direction to give the district, is there any discussion about the extended study discussion?
About what?
Is there any questions for Mr. Hebden about his presentation? Are there any questions? Excuse my grammar.
What are like some of the examples of why, I guess, the budget went over what was thought to be?
I think there's a lot of the cost escalation, I think, is probably a big piece of why. And just everything costs more. Like I said, the insurance, it's just, you know, we tried to budget for it, and when it's 18% more, and that's just one example of things throughout, you know, paper towels and every other widget that we pay for is just escalating. Yeah.
So this is a general question because I'm still learning, but we probably only have one possibility for insurance. Is that correct?
There are other options. But as I mentioned, that in Washington State, because the statute of limitations, they're gonna, it's a Washington State thing. It's not this insurer versus that insurer.
So I think the context I can provide, so I'm connected to superintendents from across Washington State, and regardless of their insurance provider, every district is seeing the same kind of percentage of increase. So it isn't like I know a superintendent friend in another district across the state who isn't seeing this increase, because we would then be looking at their insurance provider. So regardless of who the insurance provider is, the increases that school districts are seeing across the state is the same.
Mr. Hebden, in your follow-up to the board, can you provide some information on why the auditor's office recommends a 60-day fund balance? From their perspective, what's the utility of having a 60-day? So just a little bit more kind of explanation about why that's a recommendation.
Yeah.
Especially because we have an excellent credit rating as a school district, because we have that firm commitment to that 5% balance. That's been something the board's always supported. That's something that we've actually been attacked on, because we have this fund balance, and yet we do it for that rating, we do that for a rainy day, we do it for lots of different reasons, and we've been really firm on that. And now you're telling us we need to double it. Is that something new they just came out with this year?
I'll get some context.
Okay.
So is there a loss? I mean, other than the fact we're not using that funds, is there some loss that comes with holding back 60 days versus 28 days where we're at right now, as far as money that we're not going to get from the state next year because we didn't spend it all, that kind of thing?
This would be another $16 million of BEA funds that we wouldn't be directing to student program and/or staffing. But there isn't loss of funds if we were to hold out the additional percentage.
I mean, to me, this is
approximately 16 million.
the economic climate that we're in right now is not as stable as it was in years past, and I think that's part of the reason why they have increased it. And personally, I don't see it as a bad thing. I don't think we can get there in 1 year. I think it's something that we could probably shoot for. I would encourage, that would be my approach, is to try to improve it above the 28 days, but at a pace that hopefully that we can just continue to increase it. I don't know that I have a goal to say how much each year, but as much as we could, comfortably, or without hurting too bad.
Well, and to follow up to what the superintendent said a moment ago is if the board at some point wants to begin the process of adopting the SAO's recommendation regarding the rainy day, 60 days in this case, what are the consequences for program funding, funding for our students? You know, what monies would we have to tuck away, which we couldn't spend on instruction? And so, I mean, these are long-term questions, but I think part of the deliberations for this long-term planning should include what are the consequences for instruction if we do adopt this SAO recommendation versus not.
I'm surprised we've been talking about this SAO recommendation in this I wouldn't say political, this economic climate, as we are already making cuts close to children. And we have a 5% budget, you know, right now in place, and I think we need to, and we do have excellent credit rating, and I think we need to keep that. I don't want to dig into that yet, but we are making cuts close to children, and with this $4 million shortfall, we might be making even more. We have not had to lay off paraeducators and teachers like they have in other school districts, and we might get to where we're doing that. And in a lot of situations that directly affect student learning, and I'm not ready to go there. So I'm hoping that the state comes forward with a little bit of this funding that we need, but we know the economic climate there isn't great. And I'm also hoping that we can pass this levy in February to help alleviate some of these things. But in the meantime, I think we need to not worry about that right now. We need to focus on not making cuts any closer to children than we absolutely have to, and figuring out this $5 million shortfall so it doesn't have to come out of our reserve, so that we are not in a position where we can't go out for this levy year, and we can't go out for the next bond and get the best interest rates for our community. So that is my opinion.
Well, I would just say, Director Phillips, that I agree with you that I'm not advocating adoption of the 60 days. But if the board is considering that as a long-term strategy, which I am not advocating right now, then we need to know I need to know, and I think the board needs to know what's the rationale for the state auditor's office to be recommending this. Because maybe other school districts are, and it has significant budgetary consequences, and so, but I am also, like Director Phillips, very concerned about maintaining adequate funding for our instruction, so.
Kevin, is it possible if you bring that information back that we can also get information on how many other school districts are, where they're at in their reserves? Possibly, and how many of them are meeting the 60-day threshold? Just as something to compare.
Yes, we can get some samples of what other districts are throughout the state. I would venture to say that very few are meeting that. Very few are meeting that 60, if any.
And we were just told that we have one of the best credit ratings in the state, our school district does. And I applaud this district for being such good financial stewards, and I think we need to continue to do that, and I think we need to continue to try not to make cuts close to students as much as humanly possible.
And I would just share that, there's no ramifications from the auditor's office that you're not meeting this 60-day. There's, it's not an exit item. It's not a management letter. It's not a finding. They're just concerned because of the climate that all the school districts are in, and so they're reviewing these things, and that's a benchmark. And I'll find out more about how they came up with that benchmark, and see what other districts have for fund balance, and I can get back to you.
What's OSPI's recommendation about the rainy day?
I don't know that they have one.
They, on their website, and I believe I provided a link to that to the board in a subsequent or a past communication, they have a whole website that's about kind of the fiscal health and the conditions that they look at. and I can't remember exactly off the top of my head what, if they designated an actual fund balance number, but there is information on their website about how they look at the financial conditions of a district, and I can provide that again to the board.
In my opinion, it's really a double-edged sword because our political and economic future is somewhat uncertain right now, especially as in regards to education. And there are a lot of districts around the state who are struggling much more financially than we are. And so it would be nice to have those reserves in very uncertain times. But also, it's really important and just absolutely critical that we maintain the status quo with our students and that we're providing the amount of resources that we are now. We don't cut those resources to students because we're also seeing not the best results out of our students' academic measures right now. And so even like cutting anything close to that would have an effect on it. And so it's difficult to say like how do we navigate it and what do we do? I do appreciate that right now we do have a high credit rating and with the reserves that we have, and it's just where do we exercise caution and how do we do it? I think I'd like to hear from the district in our next reports about what does that look like if we do add to our rainy day fund? What does that mean that where are we getting that money from? What are we cutting? And then see what the board consensus is after that. Is there any further discussion before we move on to the slide that Mr. Hebden has?
I just want to say that I understand that this is a difficult time to try to do anything to increase it. I still think it's desirable to increase it, but it's a difficult time to do it. Unfortunately, when you get into these situations, that's the case. And so, I'm not saying that we chop anything off at this time. I think it'll be good to look forward and see what Michelle comes up with, and then we can discuss this more.
So the district is not looking for formal action from the board as far as the preparing for a levy, but they would like us to let them know, yes, they should go forward in planning for a levy, or no, that is something that we are not ready or prepared to do right now. So discussion on that topic.
I think we need to hear about the long-term management plan before we make that decision. I think it's going to be probably obvious that we're going to need something, but until we know more about that and what the requirements are as far as the needs, I think it would be useful.
So as I understand it, the long-term management plan is bond funds, and the district is asking about moving forward with the levy, which would be replacement levy, which is coming up in 2020. It will be an election next February, or whenever we choose, but usually in the past, we have historically done it in February. So it would be different from the bond guidance we would give to the district.
Just for clarification, and I guess for, not that the public doesn't know what an EP&O levy is, but just for reiterating if they weren't paying attention in the, or weren't in the study session we had, what exactly does the EP&O levy fund?
EP&O levies fund essentially the gap that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation of the state's prototypical model that they allocate to us and what it actually costs to operate a district. And the athletic programs, it funds extracurricular activities.
Yeah.
She's moving the mic.
The EP&O levy, so levies are for learning, bonds are for building, and I completely understand how that could be confusing because we just spent the entire study session talking about bonds and a long-term facilities management plan. The long-term facilities management plan will govern how we work with bonds. Levies are for learning, so you use them for the things that enhance the learning experience of students. Because of the prototypical school funding model in Washington State, any amount of salary of an employee that's beyond the average is funded out of the levy. 100% of employee groups that the state doesn't fund enough of to run a district, for example, what do they give us, 2 school psychs or 3 school psychs, and we have at least 1 for every building or something like that. So 100% of every school psychologist beyond the 2 that they fund, 100% of them are funded out of the levy. The same with every nurse over the allocated amount of nurses of the prototypical school funding model. In addition, 100% of all athletic programs are funded out of the levy. Part of any transportation that's not to and from school is funded out of the levy. 15% of our special education program is funded out of the levy. So those are the examples I can think of off the top of my head. There's more, but I just wanted to give a real flavor for what is included in the levy. Without levy funds, you can see our current budget cannot absorb those costs. It's over by, $5.5 million even with the levy. So the levy right now is what, 32 million?
Yeah, so levy and LEA,
LEA.
because they are a combined package.
Right.
You pass a levy, you get LEA. Our budget this year, they're $41 million. That's 12.4% of our budget.
And Mr. Hebden,
Between the
without a
levy
levy, there is no LEA.
That is correct.
Right, okay. Yep.
So to me, I think we all know we want to run a levy, so I think that's already a given. And I don't know if that's the direction that we want right now because
The district will never assume direction from the board. We need consensus of the board to direct us in public to go and prepare for a levy.
Okay, so this whole presentation to me showed me that we are going to have to increase the cost of our levy. It didn't even tell us that we needed to run a levy. We already know we need to run a levy, and I appreciate the fact that the board needs to tell you that because I am 100% on board for running a levy. I want to see the numbers. Obviously, I want to see the numbers of both the bond and the levy to see because we need to take both into account. If we're going to up the levy a huge percentage, and then we're going to go out for a bond the next year to replace some of these schools and build a middle school so that we're not so overcrowded in our middle schools, we just need to know what the impact to the voter is going to be. So we do need to know both those numbers because even though one's a levy and one's a bond, we need to know what we're asking our community for. About yes, we need to run a levy. It sounds like we're going to need to run a levy with an increase, and I'm imagining that as a board we will decide that increase later. So that's my opinion.
Absolutely.
I agree with Director Phillips.
And that is exactly all the information we would bring to you as a board so that you could make that further direction and decisions.
So let me just clarify. So this is to prepare for the levy for further action later on.
Correct.
If that's the case, then I am definitely on board with Director Phillips, and I think we do need to give direction to prepare for that.
I agree, the levy's going to be necessary to continue.
I agree as well that we will have to run a levy in order to maintain our status quo of the district, and if we want to even think about putting any more into the reserve, then that's absolutely necessary. Director Phillips and Director Norberg do bring up a good point that we need to consider the financial impact on the voter by knowing when we ask for a levy and then right afterwards ask for a bond, what is that going to look like? So we keep that in mind. But it appears to me that we are giving you the head nod to move ahead with the levy as well as please give us projections for, and we know that there's some planning according to our study session that we're going to see those reports in the future for the 4 scenarios for bond planning for the next 4 bonds spanning over the next 15 years. If I
16?
2040, I'll be 67 in 2040.
is that
I had to figure it out. I was like, will I even be alive? I'll be 67 in 2040. That's how long the next long-term facilities management plan is going to last, until I'm 67. It's crazy.
So the levy that's going to be dropping off, I think it's in December of
2026.
2026, how much is that one right now? Do you know how much we ran that one for?
I know current year is 29 million, and it goes up a little bit each year. I can get that for you.
Mr. Hebben, do you have clear direction from the board?
I got 5 head nods, so I think it's pretty clear. Thank you.
So, Board President Brown, I do want to acknowledge that Kevin has been a phenomenal member of this team. He's taken a position at the Ben Franklin Transit and is will be transitioning out of our organization on March 17th. And so I just want to publicly acknowledge Kevin's service. I want to thank you, Kevin, for your service and dedication to this organization. I'm a better person from having known you. I'm a better leader because of you, and our community is better because you're in it. And so please, my gratitude to you for allowing me this moment to thank you in public. And if you wouldn't mind joining me in a round of applause for Kevin, I would appreciate it. I did it without
Yes,
crying,
thank you.
Kevin.
I've only ever known this school district with
Thank you.
Mr. Hebden as head of financial services. When I was considering running for this position, he was kind enough to sit down with me and talk over school finance, and it was very educational. So I just want to say that you will be missed.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your work, Kevin. We've really enjoyed your presentations and enjoyed you, and we just want to thank you for your dedication to this district these last several years.
We wish you the best in your future endeavors. On that somewhat melancholy note, we will go on to our board reports. The first report we have this evening, and after our reports, we will have the opportunity for public comment. But actually before, I'm going to change my mind and say, because that was such a hefty discussion and extended study, do we have any comments from the public on the 2024-2025 budget update and levy planning? Anyone here in attendance in the boardroom who would like to comment? Mr. Garrett, anyone online? We will have another opportunity after the reports for public comment as well. So we will go on to our first report, which is the Superintendent Student Action Council reports, Student Advisory, Student Board Reps.
Good evening, Board President Brown, Superintendent Michelle Whitney, and members of the board. I'm Danica Reyna, one of the 3 student representatives presenting tonight. We're just here to give you an update on the meeting that took place February 26th with our Superintendent Student Action Council. So we're gonna do it.
Yeah, so we started off our meeting by splitting all of the students into their respective schools. I think we had 2 Chihuahua groups, 1 Pasco High group, and then we had 1 that was both New Horizons and Delta. We didn't have very many people from either of those schools, so we kind of combined them there. And then we had asked them to kind of brainstorm, what activities they have at their school, whether that ranged from clubs, sports, cultural events, just anything that they could think of that, made them excited to want to attend a school event or anything of that sort. And then after we gave them a couple minutes to do that, and then we had a couple people stay from each table while the rest rotated around. We did a couple rotations with that, so all of the people were able to see all of the other schools, kind of share some ideas from their own school to other schools. Yeah, that was the event or activity that we started with. And then kind of moving forward into what happened next, Michelle, she presented a kind of an overview of the incident that happened between Pasco and Hanford on February 4th. We felt that it was kind of right to inform the Student Action Council and give them an update and kind of clarify anything that they were kind of wondering or, hearing from a long thread of people that kind of gets a little distorted. We thought it'd be good to hear directly from the superintendent an update on the situation, along with her asking for suggestions on how the school district could best support students moving forward. That was also a big part of that. We had people put those on note cards on the way out so they could really think about what they were putting down, didn't have to kind of take it from the top of their head. And then in these next few slides are kind of some of the major and reoccurring suggestions for supports that the students were wanting to see. And here I'll kind of send it over to Mason for those.
So the first suggestion was to add more security to sporting events. Actually, I'll explain. The first bar is the suggestion itself. The second bar is the people it would be their responsibility to look into the suggestion, and the third bar would be the status, whether it's done, being worked on, whatever that is. First suggestion was adding more security to sporting events. I felt like I heard this from a few people talking about this. This has been done and worked on over time too. The more communication between sports teams is underway. Discussions are happening, and I assume have been happening since the incident occurred. Ensuring best practices, which is also done and was under the athletic directors or ADs. Supporting for student athletes for dealing with escalated situations is also under ADs and is under consideration. Change athletic schedules is under athletic directors and WIAA. This is to be decided and to be looked into. The next suggestion would be communicate the expectations for attendees and athletes who are attending events. This is done, and I believe this has happened like the whole time, but expectations are always announced before every game or contest. Communicate a way to report inappropriate behavior at games by athletes and attendees. This is done. The WIA's reporting tool is highlighted and made clear to athletes and attendees. What is that reporting tool exactly, Michelle?
So the WIAA has a very clear mechanism for reporting issues of racial discrimination, harassment, intimidation, and bullying, especially when it's something that, for example, if I was to experience that behavior from the opposing team, I go right onto WIAA's website through a link, and I can report that directly to WIAA. And I think it's important to differentiate. So if I'm a Pasco School District student and experience that behavior from our own students, I still report to the adult that's there. It's if I'm a Pasco School District student and I experience that from an opposing team's attendees and or athletes, I would let my coach know, et cetera, but then I would also report it with the WIAA tool. Because ultimately, as a superintendent, I can't compel another district to hold their athlete or attendee accountable, but WIAA can.
So that's an important clarification that within our own school district, if this is happening, hopefully not. If within our own school district this is happening, Michelle can work on it, or the coaches can work on it, or the athletic directors and admin. But if it's within two different school districts and with students or adults within two different school districts, that is WIA's problem. And consulting the tool is very important. Do something to heal the harm that was done is a quite a broad statement. There's already quite a bit of work that has been done to heal that harm. obviously, we're working with a third party that specializes in this work, and Michelle's also done a lot of work. This is talking about it within the superintendent's student action council is just a piece of that work. And then next, we talked about safety, and obviously we had a presentation of safety within the school board, and they talked to you about safety too. But we had a brainstorming activity because the SAC wanted to hear about safety, and we didn't really quite know what they wanted to hear about safety. We just know they wanted to hear about safety. So we had this brainstorming activity where students talked about what they wanted to hear and then wrote it down on note cards, and we collected those. And we will be talking about that in I believe it's the June meeting. Is it May? The May meeting, which is not the next one, but the next one is on April 23rd. We have a financial wellness presentation, which a third party will be coming in and talking about financial wellness to the Student Action Council. Is there any questions from the board?
What was the general tone of the meeting when they were discussing all these situations that happened at Pasco High?
It's kind of a weird thing.
I mean, it was a little heavy since it was kind of a terrible event that kind of went down. But I think there's kind of a sense in the room that everyone kind of wanted to move past it and work through it, not avoid it. Just kind of a sense of wanting to work together to get through it and support those who need it. Any other questions from the board?
Thank you very much for your report, as always. We appreciate hearing from our student board representatives, and you always do a great job. So, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, Assistant Superintendent Cital is on his way up to the lectern to give us our next report on Washington Clean Building Performance Standards Energy Management Update and our grant award. Mr. Cital.
Good evening, Board President Brown, Superintendent Whitney, members of the board. I am here to present a brief update on the Washington Clean Building Performance Standard. As a recap of our January 28th presentation, the Clean Buildings for Washington Act, House Bill 1257, was enacted in 2019 and set energy performance standards for all Tier 1 commercial buildings exceeding 50,000 square feet. The legislation outlined specific compliance deadlines and mandates that building owners take proactive measures to reduce energy consumption. The operation team is here to announce that the Washington State Department of Commerce has awarded the Pasco School District approximately $2 million. The grant will fund energy-efficient improvements for our facilities, especially updating the upper and lower D Hall HVAC system at Pasco High School. We'll also be conducting energy audits for our middle and elementary schools as part of the mandate for House Bill 1257. This table provides a detailed breakdown of the requirements for buildings ranging from 20 to over 2,000 square feet, along with the respective compliance reporting deadlines. With part of the funding, we are continuing to partner with Engineering Economics, Inc., EEI, to formalize energy audits and create energy management plans for the middle and elementary schools. Our goal remains to meet the clean building performance standard by utilizing state grants. We are expecting grant opportunities to become available this summer and will continue to apply for grant funding. This concludes my update on managing the ongoing energy compliance. Any questions?
Well, this is amazing news that we were awarded that grant. And for $2 million, will that completely fund the project you were talking about in the D Hall at Pasco High?
It will completely fund upper and lower D Hall and updating all the HVAC equipment.
Is that where the majority of the problems are in that hall?
I would say upper and lower D Hall is probably the majority of it. And when we come back, we'll do, because we have a project in the bond for C Hall for all the, so we'll do that next year too.
So is that repair or is that new equipment that's coming in?
That's brand new equipment.
Congratulations, Mr. Sital, on the grant. It's wonderful news. I'm just wondering, for the performance standards on slide 4, will that be incorporated at all with the facilities management plan?
Correct.
How long has this been in the works? Because we've only been recently aware of this, well, relatively recently aware, and this is incredible to have solved this problem as quickly as it is, as we were worried we wouldn't be able to solve this until the next bond.
Well, we've been doing research on the issue, right, and the equipment that's needed. We just needed the funding, and on the 28th of January, I reported that we're going after this perspective. And we've been working with the Department of Ecology, and they've been very cooperative, and we have very good friends everywhere. So there we go.
Woohoo! Win for Pasco.
A great win for Pasco.
Mr. Sital, how many other school districts or other entities in the state apply for that grant?
I wouldn't know. That's their piece. We just received the funds.
Do you know how many, are we the only one that received it, or is there other?
We just don't know that. We just know that we have funds of $2 million that come in our way.
And just to confirm, we'll be replacing the HVAC system at Pasco High and D Hall this year?
We will begin tomorrow. We're going out to advertise tomorrow. So yes.
Very good.
We will start, we'll probably bring bids in April. And we'll, yes, so the work starts tomorrow. We start advertising tomorrow and then get close the bids somewhere in April and bring them to you in April.
And then once the bid is approved in April, then how long do you estimate it would take to replace the HVAC system?
We're expecting probably a week every a classroom a week till we get it done.
Mr. Sital, you had said that there's also going to be energy audits. Is that going to, on the middle and elementary schools, is that going to include also the newer elementary schools, or?
I brought you 15 schools in January, so it's going to be the whole management system for all middle and elementary schools. So yes, just what we did with the high schools, we're doing it, and we're going to go look at how can we save energy for the middle schools and elementary schools. So we're auditing all our system, so we can have a nice performance program.
Another question I had real quick is, so if the bids for the replacement of the HVAC and also the elementary school audits come in lower than the $2 million, what happens to the rest of the money?
We're not there yet, so we're hoping that we're able to use it for our other facilities, because we still have some programs that we could use for energy conservations that we talked about in January. So we're going after some other funding to do some of the other work. So hopefully we can add that work to it.
Other schools or any building that needs?
Well, right now we're focusing on our 2 high schools, right? Chihuahua and Pasco High. So we want to I showed you the upgrades that we would need to do for both.
Well, Mr. Sital, it seems like almost every time that you're in front of us, you're telling us about another grant that the school district was awarded. And so we just want to acknowledge your work, because I imagine these grants take some searching for what's available, and then the application process must not be simple and straightforward, and takes a lot of work on your end. So we do appreciate your work, as well as those of us in the district who apply for those grants, and make sure that we get those extra funds so that we're serving our students and staff to the best way possible.
Thank you. I'll share that with the operation team, because we have a great team that works very close on making sure this gets done.
Have you already told the staff at Pasco High School?
No, the principal's right there. I just told her, hey, we have a meeting so we can start tomorrow.
Yay!
Can we give a round of applause for the group?
I know, I'd love to be a fly on the wall for that. That is exciting.
Thank you so much.
We have one student who goes to Pasco High. Do you feel like that will be a noticed change?
I think there's been a couple of times at D Hall where I've been a little toastier than I would say is comfortable in the summer months, but so I think that'll be greatly appreciated from all the students at Pasco High.
Great, thank you. All right, Superintendent Whitney. Board Progress Monitoring Report, 9th grade on track for graduation through core instruction and intervention/acceleration.
Thank you, Board President Brown, members of the board. It's my pleasure to be in front of you to present about our Board Progress Monitoring Report tonight. The first few slides you've seen before this is a part of our new process in collaboratively working together as a board and superintendent team to not only improve outcomes for kids, but also improve the performance of the superintendent, or my performance. The way that we do this work together is governed under policy 1260. And 1260 outlines some very clear requirements for how the board progress monitoring reports are done, including the need to use a color coding rating system. Tonight, we are focused on 100% of our students will graduate from, or 100% of our students will be on track at the end of 9th grade. We know our students who are not on track at the end of 9th grade have a higher likelihood of dropping out of high school, so we certainly want to act early on intervening to ensure their success. So goal number 3 has I've talked to you in the past about this document as our district strategic improvement plan. In the past, what we haven't always talked about is the buckets of work under each goal. So under the goal number 3, the on-track goal, there are 2 targets. One is to engage students in a foundational experience aligned with the state learning standards using core curriculum materials, and implement an early warning system to intervene and help students get on track and stay on track at the end of 9th, so they're on track at the end of 9th grade. We've been working through a process of really making multi-tiered systems of support work real and relevant in our district. We've been doing this in collaboration with an outside agency called AIR, who did an audit for us. Multi-tiered systems of support really contain all of the mechanisms or all the components that you see on the screen. And we promised that each of the time we were in front of you that we'd be very conscientious about pointing out where in the multi-tier systems of support does the aspect we're talking about fall. It continues to fall on the continuum of supports. The other board progress monitoring reports I've talked to are really about that tier 1 instruction. This, which is the instruction or the core instruction, that's what every student gets. And I really like this graphic of the layers of the pyramid. Every student, regardless of designation, whether a general education or a special education, they get access to tier 1. Some students need, which is our core instruction, it's really the backbone of the instructional delivery of teachers. Some students, even with access to that core instruction, need another level of support. So tier 2 interventions are designed for students who need additional assistance beyond that core curriculum. And if a student doesn't show progress in tier 2, they may need to move into tier 3. But tier 2 is really what we're talking about when we're talking about that early warning system for 9th graders who are not on track. So on this slide, you will see the percentage of students on track by the end of 9th grade by cohort. And certainly what we would want to see is this 9th grade on track, this data being very consistently higher every year. You can see pre-COVID, we were really making some very significant gains. When I first came on as superintendent 10 years ago, this was 46%. 46% of our 9th graders were on track for graduation. So that was really the catalyst for this board, or the board at the time, designating 9th grade on track as an area of focus for our district. And we made some very significant strides between 2016 and 2023 to influence that 46% to almost 83% pre-COVID. Since COVID, our data has, it's been spotty rebounding. What I would love to see is that data continually to get higher every year. That is not what we're seeing. We're seeing kind of 70 to 74 and back to 70. So for that reason, it's designated as yellow. We're certainly focused on it. Things were moving in the right direction, but the data definitely shows that we need to get refocused on it. The largest drop on track happened during the pandemic. Like I said, pre-pandemic, we were almost at 83%. When you look across cohorts, like for example, in the class of 2023, they were almost 83% on track, and then you can see how their graduation cohort rates played out. We would expect to see that. The higher the ninth grade on track, the higher the graduation rate if our data tracks what we're seeing, what the research said we would see. Interestingly enough, the year that our ninth graders were at 60% during COVID, we were still graduating them at 85%. And again, the asterisk just reminds us that that was COVID. There were layered waivers that were available to our kids to meet the graduation requirement. So as we get kind of past the pandemic and get refocused on our ninth grade on track, again, what we would like to see is year over year this percentage getting higher.
So Superintendent Whitney,
Yes, ma'am.
Ninth grade on track, when we look at those percentages, that means that those students are passing all of their classes.
No,
They have
thank you
a D or
for
above.
thank you for asking that question. I should have brought that up. I apologize. So for us, it means that they're earning six credits. Right? 6 credits? No, that I said that. I said it so confidently, and then I started questioning myself. 6 credits. So because we run a trimester schedule, our kids could actually fail a class and still earn 6 credits. So our data, if you went on the state's website and looked at this, it would look different because the state says they can't fail a class. So our data is a bit wonky when you look at the state's designation for us being on track, because again, for us, we say 6 credits because a kid could fail a class, and because of the trimester schedule, still be on track. So thank you for asking that question. It's good clarification.
Could you give an example what would take to get 6 credits? If that's what's required for ninth grade grad to be on track, was to get 6 credits. Am I understanding that correctly?
So if you have the normal amount of classes within a trimester, which is what I think at every high school it's around 5 classes a day. If you can fail one of those classes, not per trimester, but you can fail one of those classes per year, correct? To get 6, and you would still get 6 credits.
I believe each class is 0.5 credit, so for every 2 classes you do, that's a full credit you earn. So in a trimester, you earn about 2.5 credits, which means you'd be over the 6 credits by the end of the year. So it gives you wiggle room to fail a class, but not enough room to continuously fail. So it's just how many, if you were to take what you're supposed to be taking regardless, you would still earn 6 credits. It's just the way classes are weighed.
Thank you.
Thank you, student board reps. I panicked. I'm like, I don't know how credits work at the high school. Okay, so percentage of students on track so when you look at the 23-24 school year, we have not tracked data this way in the past when we've presented this to the board, but we thought it would be interesting to look at it. So when you look at our students by trimester, what we're seeing is the highest percentage of passing happens in Tri-1, and then by Tri-2 and 3, you're seeing a reduction in the percentage of students passing, which is a concern for us. So for the class of 2027, when you look at trimester to trimester, there's a steady decline, and that's definitely not what we want to see. So this indicator is actually designated as red. We have some work to do around that. So for us, this indicates that the early warning system to identify students who are not on track, we need to work on it.
Superintendent Whitney, do we know the factors that lead to the difference between, say, passing mostly in trimester 1, but 2 and 3 is a lower one? Why lower on number 3 versus number 1?
I don't know those factors, but can certainly do that research and get back to the board. I could guess what they are, but the student board reps, do you want to take a guess what they might be?
It's probably burnout.
Some students will get distracted with extracurricular activities or new friendships, new groups. During your second, third trimester, there's a little more opportunities for you to do other things. Students tend to get a little distracted, and then towards spring trimester, we even see this in elementary schools, is when kids start to lose patience being in class. So a lot of students will end up skipping in third try a lot. So.
Superintendent Whitney, what exactly is the early warning system? Is that what we're looking at right here?
Yeah, I'll talk about that in the next couple of slides, and then if you still have questions, we can dig into that, yeah. So this data shows ELA math and science, just so that you have all of the core contents on the same slide. And you can see the same data trend is happening where the highest percentage passing is in Tri 1. And then we're seeing some falling off by Tri 3. And so again, we're going to want to dig into that and understand why that's happening and tweak our quote unquote early warning system so that we're truly intervening early so that that data percentage is increasing by the end of the year. So I wanted to highlight core instruction briefly. In the other presentations, I've talked pretty extensively about how our core instruction management systems work. But when teachers are developing and designing and delivering core instruction, we use our professional learning teams to analyze data of student performance, and our teachers then make adjustments in what they're doing in their classrooms to engage students around the core curriculum. So we're going to continue to really amplify the work in the professional learning communities, continue to focus on implementing core instructional materials and updating core instructional materials as needed. I said this multiple times during the other presentations, core instruction, delivering high quality core instruction for 180 days in front of students is first best teaching. And so the extent to which we level high quality instruction there should move the needle for student achievement. We'll continue to support teacher with professional development to understand both the rigor of what's expected of the state standards, but also how to maximize the instructional materials that we've identified or they've identified in each of the content areas, and then continue to increase the use of our benchmark assessment systems, especially in the area of mathematics. We're really excited about the potential of that to leverage student achievement. So when we specifically look at early warning, and I hope this speaks to your question, Director Simmons, the early warning system, so we're using STAR as a STAR test as a way, so teachers are voluntarily implementing the STAR assessment for our students, and when they get that data back, they then can use that data in their professional learning communities to make decisions about students who need additional academic experiences beyond the core instruction. And so STAR is a new assessment for us at the high school. We've used it in our elementary and middle school for a really long time, but the high school is now utilizing it. And those of you who went to Pasco High School's State of the School review, they presented very specifically how they're using the STAR data and actually the benefits they're already seeing from it. So I think when you talk about what's the early warning system, it's delivering the STAR assessment, looking at that data, and then responding and making decisions about what beyond core instruction do students need. And students then get access to that additional academic experience beyond the core in both what's called EI and Hawk time. And I think you might remember our student board representatives talking to you in one of their presentations about how EI and Hawk time work at each of the schools. But that is the opportunity for students to increase participation or intervention in targeted enhancements or intervention. So in addition to that, we meet with students and families of students who need to close that gap and develop individual plans each semester. And then weekly grade level teams meet to review academic and attendance data again in those professional learning communities. So on Thursdays, when high school classes release early, teams of teachers are meeting, looking at data to make decisions about both modifications to their core instructional delivery, but also what beyond the core do some student groups need. Does that help, Director Simmons?
I just had one question. Like you said it was voluntary for the STAR to be administered. Do we have a percentage of teachers that are administering the STAR voluntarily?
I don't off the top of my head, but can get it for you, yeah.
Thank
I
you.
do know that there's a lot of enthusiasm about it, and so as teachers are using it and finding it successful, there is nothing more competitive than a teacher, and so when teachers see other teachers using something and they're finding success with it, it's a real motivator for people to give it a try too.
Superintendent Whitney, is ELA and math the two subjects that have the most failures by students, or is it kind of mixed among, math, ELA, English, or social studies, science? I mean, is there is there one subject or two that have the most failures per
Yeah,
year?
it's a great question. I don't know that off the top of my head, but can certainly find out.
So the ELA and math, is that both done in English then? Or how is that, Spanish, or what's this?
It depends on the academic program for students. So we do have groups of students who are still learning Spanish, and some of their classes may be in Spanish. For example, we have about, I don't know, 45, 60 kids at Pasco High School that take advanced mathematics in Spanish because they're still learning the language, so we're not holding them back in learning high academic mathematics content, and so we're teaching it to them in Spanish. But then we have other kids who we have, and then eventually, and also our dual language program will eventually roll up into the high school, so there'll be more content in Spanish. So it depends on what their academic program is based on their where they are with language acquisition. Primarily those language programs are in Spanish, but we do have, and those students are right now at Pasco High. Next year they'll go to their boundary school, but we also have Russian, Ukrainian, and other languages at Chihuahua High School. We also offer credit recovery through extended trimester grading periods, credit recovery throughout support throughout the school day, after school tutoring, in Saturday school, which I remember going to Saturday school as a student, and there's nothing worse than going to school on a Saturday. So definitely would want to take advantage of that and get in and out of credit recovery as quickly as you can so you can get your credits back, or your Saturdays back. One of the next steps that we think is really important for us to consider as a district is extending this early warning system to the middle school level through that vertical alignment front, especially during 8th to 9th grade transition, so that we know early, before students are already failing, that students may need additional support. So if students are exhibiting behaviors around failing classes as an 8th grader, the idea that they're going to come to the 9th grade and all of a sudden stop exhibiting those behaviors is not likely without some kind of intervention. So really beefing up that communication between middle school and high school, and creating individual plans for students to be successful before they've not been, they want to show success before they're not successful is really important. So that will be the next steps for us, is to evaluate what that vertical alignment and vertical collaboration could look like. So with that, I'm happy to entertain questions, but I also have my smart friends in the audience who are experts at the high school level, and our student board reps could probably help too.
Do our student board representatives have any insight to 9th grade on track, or like what? I really liked Danica's observation about like a springtime, because even as an elementary teacher, we always see like an increase in negative student behaviors when spring comes around. There's just something about the arrival of warm weather and sunshine that brings a little bit of additional mischievousness to the school. So well, that's not grounded in data. That's just, those are my own qualitative research findings. Any other comments?
I know for the spring, another reason of that could be that branch between spring break and summer. There's a lot of travel because there's there's a 3-day weekend. And I know a lot of students that do travel in the springtime as well. With our winter trimesters, we do have a lot of Latino students that stay in Mexico for a month at a time, which then you're missing classes, which then freshman year, if you miss, say you miss algebra for 2 weeks, it's really hard to get caught up. There's a lot of factors that go into that. For the spring aspect, though, I'm gonna say from my personal experience and the experience of people around me, towards that last month and a half of the school, a lot of students just stop, they just check out. And obviously it's not representative of all students, but there's a lot of students during that last month where summer's almost there, that students kind of forget a little bit and fall behind on some of their coursework, and then you see grades drop.
Do you see anything that we could do to help, our situation here with graduation? Any comments that you have on things that you see that could be incorporated into being more successful in graduating these students?
For freshman year, I would continue to apply pressure on attendance. Because if you build really good attendance habits freshman year, you're basically set in stone for your senior, sophomore, junior year with your high attendance rates. So continuing to pressure our freshmen into showing up, being there, finding ways to like engage our freshmen in extracurriculars, because that also helps you stay engaged in school. For instance, sports. If you don't have high enough grades, you can't play. So sports is also a great motivator for students who might need to catch up in grades. I know students who play sports, and when it's their off season, I know that they struggle a little bit more in classes. But just helping with our freshman class and finding different motivators for them to stay involved at school, because it's easy to go home and check out. So I feel like if we just continue to apply pressure on attendance, it would greatly impact the percentages that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. With the attendance, attendance is a pretty slippery slope. With you get comfortable missing some school, and then from there you get your chronically absent students. And then along with getting kind of the vertical alignment of the early intervention from 8th grade, I think that would be something that would really help. Because like you said, if you're struggling 7th, 8th grade, nothing at 9th grade is just going to magically snap its fingers and have you be able to be on track with that. So I think that's a really important part of that.
Well, the students nailed it. I had two comments, and one was I would love to see a correlation between the attendance and the kids that are failing. I think that would be really interesting to know. And number two is that vertical alignment between 8th and 9th grade. And are those kids already suffering from attendance, or are they struggling to get the content? I would love to know what was happening there and what we're doing to prepare those kids for success in the 9th grade. So good job, students.
Superintendent Whitney, can you remind me, do they take the STAR assessment in 8th grade as well?
Yes. I'm sorry, I forget. Yes,
Okay.
they do.
I was just wondering, because I guess maybe they could even use that information to determine if they're at risk coming into 9th grade.
Yes, which you're absolutely right, and then that's exactly then why utilizing it still then again in the high school, and so you have that vertical articulation. Kids have been taking it since kindergarten if they've been with us, so it only made sense to continue usage of that same assessment tool at the high school level. And you're right, it would be you could look at that and find some indicators between that and attendance and build that correlation and find students that would need some additional support going into 9th grade.
All right, Superintendent Whitney, I see that you're ready to go on to feature agenda items.
I'm ready whenever you are, no pressure.
So I will go ahead and do feature agenda items, and then we'll go back to any community comments around the reports.
So I just wanted to highlight for you the next two board meetings. The study session for our next board meeting will be a continuation of our State of the School reviews. I do want to acknowledge and thank our principals. We originally had tonight as a State of the School review, and we had to reschedule them till next meeting. And so I just want to acknowledge their flexibility so that we could have Trevor Carlson here tonight. So that'll happen during the study session. The dual language presentation is really tentative because I'm not sure how long the long-term facilities management planning team needs, and I just want to be mindful of the length of the meeting. So the long-term facilities management team may need to be an extended study, and if it feels like that's going to take an amount of time that is unreasonable during a board meeting, we would then reschedule the dual language presentation. If we feel like we can get them both done, we will. Mira will also be highlighting, just really briefly, to keep along our student celebration or school celebrations. There are some schools who have really shown some amazing performance around the STAR student growth percentile, and so we really want to highlight and celebrate those schools, so we'll do that. And then we have the first week in spring of April will be spring break, but when we come back, that first board meeting in April has traditionally been a board retreat, and I'll work with board officers to determine the agenda for that meeting. So that will be our next two meetings.
Thank you. Are there any board members who would like to propose future agenda items? Okay, so we'll go back to a community comment on our reports. So reports A, B, and C that were given tonight by the student board representatives on the Superintendent Student Action Council, Assistant Superintendent Cital on our grant award, and then Superintendent Whitney's presentation on our 9th grade on track. Would anyone in the boardroom like to give public comment about any of the reports? Mr. Garrett, anyone online? Thank you. We will move on to communications. Dr. Norberg, would you like to start us off this evening?
Sure. So last week, Steve Simmons and myself went to New Horizons and toured the facilities, and it was quite eye-opening to see all that's being done to try to get these students to graduate, those who are struggling, and those who have just thrived under that kind of a situation. And they are truly trying to get these kids to graduate. Everything that they can try to do, and I think they are to be applauded, and it was just really neat. If you haven't toured that, I highly encourage you to tour New Horizons. I just want to thank all those in the building, Mr. Satul, and for keeping things under budget for the 2 new high schools, as well as getting this extra funding for the HVAC. I just really commend you on all the good work that you and your team are doing and keeping our buildings up and the new buildings coming. I just think that in the climate that we're in, you've done an excellent job and deserve a lot of credit for getting those buildings coming up, and they're under budget right now, so we hope that just continues and progress coming, and we're going to be into those buildings, and so I just think that's awesome, and I want to just congratulate you.
I just want to remind everybody, we just got a date for our team at Pasco, where we will tour the home that our Pasco and Chihuahua kids have been building. And that date is the 28th of May, and it's at 11 a.m. And the address is actually in the Friday update. But that's always exciting, a really fun thing to go to. One of the supporters usually provides lunch that we can all go to, but it's just so fun to interact with the kids and go through the building or the house that they built and see where not just the kids that built the house had an impact, but you'll see things from other places throughout the 2 high schools that with the landscaping and maybe a fireplace mantle and things that other classes throughout Pasco High School and Chihuahua have had an impact on that home. So mark your calendars for the 28th of May at 11 a.m.
I just want to reiterate my deep appreciation for our district social workers and the important work they do to help our students throughout the academic years. So thank you very much for your service.
State basketball was these past 2 weekends. I think the qualifiers for that was the past 2 weekends. Chihuahua girls got 4th. I congratulate them on that and all of our other basketball players that went there and did great.
I just want to echo Mason's message of congratulations to the Chihuahuas girls basketball team for placing 4th at state. I know they've been working extremely hard this season, and we're all very, very proud of them. They do well. They always do well. And then I also want to echo what Dr. Kennedy was saying about our social workers and our school retirees. Our school social workers do a lot of work in our school district that might not always be recognized or seen. They do work with children individually, and we can see these impacts in student behavior and children being excited or having more resources to do more things. And so I just want to say that we are very thankful for them. I'm very thankful for them, and that along with our school retirees, these the former teachers, they've dedicated their lives to being educators, and after retirement decided to continue to dedicate themselves to do something to benefit education, and I think that's a beautiful thing.
I will pass.
I just want to say a couple things. first is, as we prepare for this levy and this bond planning, and we get community input, I encourage the community to really get involved, because as we sit up here and have to make decisions based on what we need to do for in this planning, and some critical decisions that are probably coming, and some pretty hard decisions that are probably going to come, it's really important. We represent the community, and so I look forward to having that community input to be able to help, facilitate what we as a community want around that planning. Along with what Director Norberg was saying, was able to attend New Horizons High School, and that was just a wonderful experience. That school has a very unique, it's just very unique among other schools that we have here. First off, it is a high school, so you're dealing with a lot different situations. And just a couple things. One thing I wanted to highlight was we did go into one class, and it was the instructor there, and I think her name was Miss Bergstrom, I want to say. Or no, I apologize. It's Bruce, was it Brewster? I think that's who it was. Anyway, she taught one of the classes, and she was highlighting, she had 3 students sitting there, and she was highlighting them. And one of the girls she was kind of highlighting, she got very emotional about. And that girl also got very emotional too. And you could tell they had a strong bond. And that this teacher, it just impressed me that this teacher was, I mean, I know teachers care about their students, but they see a lot of students. But this was very unique. This was a very strong bond. And I just thought that was cool. So I really wanted to thank Becky Hickman for that tour and taking her time to do that. That is a great school. It is a great campus. It's a great alternative learning environment, and I think it's good to highlight that it's available for students that need an alternative learning environment, and it's also a different learning environment. So it fills a unique need that we have in our district. And then I also, really quick, was able to attend Stevens Middle School and tour that. And I want to thank Tyler Thompson, the principal of that school as well. Great school, phenomenal. They're uniquely situated right kind of in the center of Pasco, and they just kind of get everything. And I walked in that school, it's clean, it's orderly, it's organized. And they even highlighted that some of their kids had developed a game, like a computer game, and they were just so excited about that. And it was fun to watch the team interact with the students and see how they're always asking, how they're doing, and, where's your badge and all that. It was kind of fun to see. So really enjoyed that. That's what I've really enjoyed this last couple weeks. So that's all I have.
Tomorrow is the trimester break in high schools between second and third trimester. So can't believe that we're entering into the final third of the school year, and just want to wish good academic luck to all of our high school students as they finish out the school year. My oldest is finishing out the last trimester of his high school career, and so it's just really exciting to it's always a really busy time of year, but seeing student success and reflecting on how much students have grown so far. Danica, I really appreciated your thoughts on the school social workers and school retirees. That was beautifully said. I couldn't say anything more eloquent than that. So that's all I'll say about my recognition for them. In regards to our report on 9th grade on track, I wanted to highlight that although the district is doing a lot of things to provide resources to our students who need that intervention, the best intervention comes from home. And so the school does make phone calls when students are needing some of that intervention. So that is some of the intervention that parents will get phone calls, and just checking in with your students. I get Parent Square messages. Your student was late to this class. Your student was absent today, and it's easy just to forward that and send it to my kid's phone and be like, explanation, please. What is going on? And so we are a team with our students to, as parents and as well as all the other roles that we have in our students' lives to help ensure their success as well. I attended the last performance of Zombie Prom. Pasco High did such a great job, and the staff there has just given so much to those students, and it was just amazing to see even like the improvement from the opening night to the closing night. And the other thing that I have going on is I am the WASDA District 11 WIAA representative. So we have our advisory vote coming up for all of the resolutions that have been submitted to the WIAA representative assembly that will be coming up. So I will be contacting all the WIA representatives that serve on our boards, like Director Simmons, to get their feedback on those resolutions. And so when I served previously as the board WIA representative, and when Director Simmons took it on, I told him, you really don't have to do anything. But
Amanda, Dr. Norberg is the new WIA.
Okay, thank you. But as it turns out, WIA, I've heard more and more than I ever have as in my previous years on the board in just the last few months. So it is there is a lot of resolutions and a lot of just more than that I've ever seen in the past going on with WIAA. So it will be interesting to see to hear the feedback from the other WIAA representatives around the WASDA district. Okay, thank you, Superintendent Whitney, and that takes us to our executive session.
We are requesting an executive session under 4231-10-1B for land, lease, and/or purchase, and I, litigation. We're expecting it to take about 30 minutes, and we'll be requesting no action.
We will recess into executive